gente. Welcome to another episode of the Wine and Chisme podcast. Today we have Marisa Gonzales. She is the CEO and principal strategist and designer of Marisa Gonzales Studios. How are you, Marisa?
I'm doing good, thank you. How are you doing?
I am doing well. Like I was telling you right before, like I need to do something because I need to, or not do something. I know exactly what I need to do, which is set my reminders for more than 10 minutes because I thought it was going to be, I knew I had this, right? I knew we had this conversation scheduled for today, but the time just got away from me and I get a notice um at 9 or 10 minutes before we're about to start and I'm literally barefaced, hair in a chongo, nothing. So I was like, so, but I think I'm okay. Okay for,
Yeah, and you look gorgeous for looking like for however long it took you. I wish I could get ready in that time. Takes me a
let
lot
me
longer,
tell
believe me.
you, oh, thank you. I appreciate that. Girl, you look beautiful. There's, my biggest things that I always do, I don't really wear foundation unless I have to put like a full face of makeup on. So I do the Campari tinted moisturizer, which I
Mhm.
love because it actually gives you some coverage. And then there's this brand, it's a sister brand called Dibs. And and it has a really good mascara. And so I do the, and it has like this, you can add a little bit of color, right? Because I feel like you know how it is in summertime we get darker, and once you're not in the sun all the time you get lighter. So this allows you to add just a little and just a little sheen. So I do
Mhm.
that. um Eyebrows, lips, obviously I did put some mascara on, but I didn't put it on as heavy, so it's fine. And a little blush, like just little ninja with my makeup brushes. But I'm really happy to have you here. I'm really
Thank you.
excited to talk to you. Not only about your business, but the roots of that, right? Like how
Mhm.
you bring your Latinidad, your Mexican American woman. I wanna, and you're in Kansas, by the way. I was like, girl is in Kansas. How did we end up here? So I can't wait to hear that. And also just how you've navigated, because obviously being in Kansas is very different than where I grew up, which is San Diego. So before we get into all of that, Chisme, we always start with with the wine or whatever else you're drinking. So what are you partaking in with us today?
I'm not drinking any wine. I'm drinking water with some tea in it, some nettle tea, and I put salt in it. Yeah,
Really?
I know. Yeah, because I need the electrolytes. So I that's my way of getting electrolytes because I can't drink the regular stuff because it has like chemicals in there that doesn't work with my health. So yeah, I drink that. I drink you'll always see me putting salt in my drinks, and it's like, what is she doing? Yeah, that's what I'm doing. I'm putting salt in there.
So what kind of tea do you make that doesn't
So
have
it's
chemicals that goes with you?
So I drink a lot of decaffeinated tea, but but every day I try to have a chai tea because like I can't not have caffeine. I want to have some. So chai tea is my little thing that I my treat, if you will, that I have. And but other stuff I drink like as far as teas is like Rubio's tea or I don't know how you say that. Green tea and like I love tea a lot. Like my son actually used to love tea and now he's like, I hate that stuff. And I'm like, oh, okay. But yeah, I love teas. And I drink like pop, sometimes like Sprite and Coke sometimes, but not very often. So
Yeah, I'm
yeah.
not a big soda person. It has to be a very specific thing that I'm
Mhm.
eating or specific,
Yes.
every once in a while I'll have a sip, but I'm not, but I've realized it was because my mom used to water down my drinks growing up. So a
Oh
lot
yeah,
of
that.
stuff. So I don't have a big sweet tooth. Like I love
Mm.
fruit, right? Like we bought a big thing of blueberries and I like constantly grab from
Oh,
them and stuff.
oh my God, I love
Um,
those.
right. But tea has now become part of my like evening routine. I've
Hmm.
realized I feel like it relaxes me. And maybe if it doesn't necessarily, maybe if it doesn't relax my body, it's more like it's that comfort thing that's kind of putting me in a
Yeah.
relaxed state of mind. So I've
Hmm.
noticed that I've started adding tea with the honey and lemon. I don't put sugar in my tea.
Me neither.
Even
Yeah.
even if I drink iced tea, it's usually just I squeeze some lemon in. I don't put sugar in it. But again, I think that all goes down. But I am drinking wine today.
Yeah. What kind of wine
Surprise,
are you drinking?
surprise. Right? I am actually drinking I just opened this. It's Para Wines. It's a 2022 Chardonnay from Zenith Vineyards. This is one of friends of the podcast. Sam is the owner, and this is out of the Willamette Valley in Oregon.
Oh,
And I
very
wanted to,
cool.
yeah. And I don't think I've ever shared this. And I was thinking of this. I'm like, why haven't I ever shared this? So, often there's several types of recipes that will call for like whether it's cooking wine. I don't ever have cooking wine in the house, so I use what I have. But when I use it, here is a good tip for anybody if you didn't know. Um, if you do use the wine that you have in your house, and either I will buy like a really cheap wine or I'll use what I have. But when I use what I have, which is usually better quality wine, right, than like $2 Chuck. So then it's really good that it's very good to pair whatever you're eating with that same wine. So for example, I made a shrimp scampi pasta the other night and I used some of the Chardonnay for that, and then I had some of the Chardonnay as I was having it, because then you really know that the flavors are going together. So quick and dirty tip for anybody out there who wants to know. But girl, you ready to get into the Chisme,
Yeah.
Marisa?
Yeah.
All right,
That's
I'm
good
gonna
to know,
read
though.
your
I
yeah. I'm gonna read your bio, and
okay.
I'm gonna read parts of it. Just it's a
Mhm.
lot, but I will make sure that it's included in everything. Like I
Sure.
stated, Marisa is the principal strategist and designer of Marisa Gonzales Studios, where she helps women-owned businesses, minority entrepreneurs, and nonprofits create standout brands and websites that not only look beautiful but actually work. Her path isn't traditional. She is a proud Mexican American, deeply rooted in culture, but also navigated life in a predominantly Caucasian community. This, oh, excuse me. This blend of cultural influences shapes everything she does, from her approach to design to how she connects with clients. She infuses her heritage into the way she builds brands, focused on authenticity, creativity, and community. She also has, alongside her cultural journey, she's navigated chronic health issues, including frequent migraines, late diagnosed ADHD, which impact her work and personal life. And obviously, these challenges shape how you think, work, and all of those things. But they've also taught her resilience, creativity, and the importance of flexibility in both her personal and professional life. She has faced setbacks, which we will go into because there are several, but uh, every successful challenge has been a stepping stone towards building a design agency that is not only successful, but intentional about inclusivity and accessibility for both clients and employees. We got through it. My gosh, I cannot talk.
And
Maybe
no worries.
that's because
I'm like that too.
it's because I didn't have my wine. That's right. So, salud.
Salud.
I will say I do like I always used to say I wasn't a Chardonnay person, but and I know you don't drink wine, but for those who do, I notice when there's a difference, like when it's an oak aged Chardonnay and fully oaked age, it tends to be a little bit heavier, more full bodied, more buttery. Though I don't personally, those aren't personally my favorite types of wine. So I tend to go for like steel aged Chardonnays, or even if it's half and half, tends to be lighter, brighter, more crisp, more herbaceous, a little bit more citrusy, which girl, I'm like, give me a saladito and a lemon and I'm good. So those types of flavors go well. So that's what I'm drinking, and it's very, very delicious. So
Sounds
for a
delicious.
it is. And I want to be able to start bringing some non-alcoholic wines even if uh just so people, because I get asked those questions all the time if I know non-alcoholic wines, and people are starting to reach out to me about that because I think it's really important. If you sometimes people just want to feel, nobody should ever be shamed, first of all, for not drinking, because if people say, "Oh, why not?" Like, I'm just like, "Okay, that's cool. You said you weren't drinking. All right, cool. Like, if you want to share with me why or why not, that's fine. If you don't, that's fine too. It's frankly none of my business, right? Unless somebody wants to share. But
Right.
I really want to start bringing that so I can share that with people as well. So if they want to do those things, so neither here nor there. So okay, let's start. Let's just start off with like you being in Kansas. Is this did you grow up in Kansas? How did your if you did, how did your family end up in Kansas? I always find that very interesting with Latinos in the Midwest.
Sure. Well, I do want to say one thing. I have had a wine that I've actually liked. I do not know the name of it. When my husband and I went to Hawaii years ago, it was a very, very, very belated honeymoon. His cousin is a bartender out there that lives out there, and she had us drink this wine. And I'm going to say it was the best wine I've ever had in my life. And I was like, if I had this every day, I would, it'd be a problem
There
because this
might be a
stuff was
problem.
delicious. Yeah. I mean, I've never had a wine, and I probably should ask her, but I'm not going to because I'm just like, it's probably better if I don't know. But it was probably the best one I've ever tasted in my life. And it was not a red, it was the other. So it just tells you how much I
It
know
was a
about
white.
wine. Yeah.
Was it a
So
rosé? Was it a white or a rosé?
I think it was rosé, but I could be
Yeah.
wrong.
But you know what? I love that for you because you're like that. That is like, oh, I remember that. I don't know what it was, but I remember how like good that tasted and how I enjoyed it. Whether it's one time and you never have it again, or whether it's like, oh wait, I remember this or whatever. Just I love that.
Yeah.
Okay, now let's hear the Kansas
Okay.
story, girl.
Okay, sure. So I actually grew up in Missouri, which is right next door to Kansas. Yeah, my dad is actually originally from Texas, and my mom, she was actually born in Mexico. So my grandmother, my mom's mom, she was actually born here in the States, but then she moved down to Mexico to help with my grandma. And also my grandma wanted to, my great grandma wanted to help her with my mom and the rest of the kids. But the thing is, my mom basically and obviously my grandmother, they moved to Missouri pretty shortly after she was born. So she really didn't know the life there very, very much. So they moved to Missouri, and then and because a lot of my other family, my cousins and everything like that, they all lived there already. So and then like I said, my father lived in or was born in Texas, and he moved to Missouri. I'm not really honest. I'm not really sure why. I never got that part, which I need to ask that while I have the chance. Um, but so they actually grew up together in the church, and that's how they met. So they actually have known each other since they were kids. And actually, my mom will tell me like my dad was pulling on her pigtails, whenever they were kids. So that's how long they've known each other. And then they got married, I think, when they were in their 20s. So that's where we grew up, and I grew up in Blue Springs, Missouri, a very small town. I don't really know what the population is now. It's grown quite a bit, but I don't really go back there that often, honestly. Even though I live right next door, I don't go over. I don't go there. But when I was growing up, the community was predominantly Caucasian, and so actually, I don't really know why though I know why. They moved to Blue Springs because they wanted to live like in a more of a suburban type of area versus like in the city. And they actually
Which would
had
be
their
like Kansas City, right?
yeah,
Or
exactly.
St.
Yeah.
Louis.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. Very much so. So yeah, which Kansas City is so much bigger than Blue Springs, obviously. I mean, like Blue Springs is probably like half an hour away, approximately, depending on traffic from Kansas City, Missouri. So so they actually had their house built out in Blue Springs, and then like I said, I lived there. That's the only house I ever knew when I was growing up. And actually there's like I said, growing up it was predominantly Caucasian, but when I went to, I want to say, like middle school, I met my neighbor which was down the street, like pretty much like up and around the street, but she was probably the only other Mexican person I knew growing up that was in that community. And it was her and her brother, and she was a year older than me, and I think her brother was like 2 years older than me. But I mean, we're kind of close. I mean, not like really, really close, but we're kind of close just because we were the only people that we knew that, were Mexican or, of Latin descent. And so, and I can say that really there was probably a handful of people that were like people of color that were in my middle school, and even more so in my high school. So it was something that that my brother and I have an older brother, he's 5 years older than me, that we both recognized, seeing that growing up. And my mom and dad would always have us go back to Kansas City, for Thanksgiving, or for Christmas and that type of stuff. We were very much enmeshed in our families' lives, and so we knew our cousins or anything like that. But more so, we always went to my grandma's house, which was also in Kansas City, Missouri. We'd go there for every week for family dinners, and we'd have tostadas and arroz, and beans and all that stuff. And so it was just all the stuff. And I even just thinking about it, it makes me kind of reminisce about give me that feeling of just feeling like home. And my grandma did all of it. She put it all together and stuff like that. So yeah, it was very much of even though we grew up in that community, my mom and dad really made sure that we knew who we were, whether it was listening to Mexican music, on the weekends. I know, like, and I can never think of the word. Like my dad would listen to his Mexican music, and then it's like the person going, like, doing like that.
De
I can't.
grito,
Yes,
de
thank you.
grito.
Yes, I could. Yes, I could never think of that word. So yeah, like hearing that, like it, like again, makes me think back to when I was growing up. So, like I said, my mom and dad wanted us to know our culture. The only thing that I would say that was very different for us, I mean, and maybe it was because they wanted us to assimilate to where we were living, is they didn't teach us Spanish. So like both of my parents are bilingual, but I think it was a part of that. And also just, I don't know how it is now for Latinos living in their households, but I know back then it was more like about secrets and stuff like that. So my mom and dad were always like, didn't want to teach us the language because they wanted to know what they were talking about, but they didn't want us to know what they were talking about. So
Got
that's why
it.
my brother and I didn't learn it until like we got to high school. And even then, by
Yeah, it's
that
hard
point,
to
it's kind
learn
of,
like
yeah.
when you're not constantly surrounded by it, and not and never being taught it. I have a similar history except for different reasons, because both of my parents' first language is Spanish as well. However, and I'm sure it was very similar also with your parents, but you would get in trouble. My dad's from Texas as well. He's from the Valley. He's from Brownsville, and my mom is from California, but it was still very similar experiences in regards to, if you spoke Spanish at school, you would get in trouble. My dad would tell me that he went to Catholic school, and the nuns would hit them on their hands with the ruler and stuff.
Oh my
And they
goodness.
would get in trouble. And so, they wanted our first language to be English, figuring, and it wasn't about keeping secrets. They just were like, oh, well, we'll talk enough at home, but they didn't talk enough at home,
Right.
right? It would just be anything around doing chores, anything about food, like family stuff, but not anything truly, truly significant that I would say I was fluent. I'm definitely Spanglish girly, right? I was just at an event the other day, and it was a lot of winemakers from Valle de Guadalupe in Baja California. And so I'm talking to them and some words I don't know. And I'm always like, oh, lo siento porque necesito practicar mi español. And they're like, oh, no, está bien. No necesito, and they're like, hey,
Mhm.
it just telling me stuff. And my accent is there. So when I talk it, everybody's
Yeah.
like, oh, what are you talking about? You're fine. But it's always the words, right? Certain words or
Right.
conjugations of
Yes.
words.
Hmm.
So I understand from that perspective because, like I said, it's very similar. And I think there's a lot of, do you mind to ask, are you Gen X?
Yes.
Okay.
Mm.
So I was going to say a lot of us Gen Xers in particular, right? Or older millennials, didn't get those types of experience, like didn't we weren't encouraged to speak Spanish in the household, or we weren't taught it. Like I said, the older my grandpa got, because after my grandma died, my grandpa lived with us, and the older he got, the less English he would speak, and me being the oldest, I would pick up on that more. And my sisters don't really speak any like they know words, but if I were to, like, I could go to Mexico and be okay, like,
Mm.
and give me a month there and I will come back fully fluent, right? My
Hmm.
sisters, they're not. Like they struggle really hard with the exception of certain words. So I get
Right.
that. Growing up in those times and growing up in that area, did you, obviously you can see it, right? You can tell, like you look at you and you probably look at other people and you're like, we're one thing is not like the other.
Right. Hmm. Definitely.
But do you feel like you were treated differently, whether it was by other kids or even teachers or anything? Because obviously, I think the population of our community in the Midwest has grown exponentially over the
Oh
years.
yeah, definitely.
However,
Yes.
you look back to 30, 40 years ago, and I think it was a lot more sporadic and a lot more. So how do you feel? Do you feel like people treated you different? And what do you feel like that experience taught you?
I think there were times, I mean, I know like even when you said like the teacher, it kind of triggered a memory of like, I remember this one teacher is an algebra teacher and I struggled with math a lot. Like I remember him like having favoritism towards the other people. I don't know if it's because they were in sports because he was also like a football coach, but like I remember asking him for help and he didn't really seem like he really wanted to. And I don't remember the exact memory in this moment, but I just remember like it feeling very different coming from him. Like he just didn't really seem like he wanted to take the time to teach me, but anyone else that would come up, he'd be like, yeah, let's teach you. And it's like, okay. Like I don't see the difference there. I mean, besides the obvious or what I just mentioned. And as far as like my like friends or other people, so like I remember like hanging out with friends and like when we, we'd be uh just doing other like we'd be messing around doing our teenage stuff at that time. Like some of my friends would like say, some slurs, and so I was very outspoken. So I'd be like, what did you say? And then they'd be like, oh, I didn't say anything. And it's like, okay, that's what I thought. But in case that you did, let's not say that. And like, so I felt like it did come up with some, I don't know, I guess you would even say friends if they're even going to say that. It did come up quite a bit. Like another person I knew, like they would always say like, pinche and stuff like that. Like, they'd always call me pinche. And I'm like, why are you calling me that? And he's like, because you're Mexican. And I'm like, that's stupid. So it's just like that kind of stuff would
Girl,
come
do you
up.
even know what that means? First of all, that doesn't make any sense to call somebody pinche, but also, unless they're like, and if they were trying to say that you're like a little fucker or something, right? Because that's not even the way you would say it.
Mhm.
But that's so silly. But I know that kids, first of all, kids learn things from their household, but also if there's nobody there, like if there's not an adult there to say, hey, that, like, no, this isn't right, blah blah blah, this or that. And kids can be cruel, especially in middle school. Oh my gosh, middle school is like the worst.
Yeah.
Praise God and Jesus and whoever for middle school teachers, because they have legit probably the most patience, because you have kids trying to find themselves, and ooh, it's a whole other thing. Wine break. Time to refill that glass and come back for more Wine and Chisme. Hola, Wine and Chisme familia. If you're loving this conversation, don't let it end here. Follow us on Instagram and TikTok at The Wine and Chisme for behind the scenes moments, wine recommendations, and daily doses of chisme between episodes. And if you don't already know, we bring these conversations to YouTube as well. Subscribe to our channel so you can see the full experience, the laugh, the tears, the wine pours, and those moments when the chisme gets real. Plus, don't miss out on our bi-weekly Spill the Chisme newsletter. Get exclusive content, wine picks, and all the chisme delivered straight to your inbox. Head to thewineandchismepodcast.com to subscribe or just DM me the newspaper emoji on Instagram and I'll hook you up. Your support helps us amplify more voices and share more stories that matter. Now, let's get back to this conversation because it's about to get even better. As you're going through this, I suffer from migraines as well, so I get that part. Like what you have, you said you have chronic health issues. When
Mm-hmm.
did that start? Were you young when those things started? Did it start with migraines? Was it something else?
So it started when I was 12, when I started my cycle. It really for me was more of like, at that time like a hormonal thing. And then really whenever I hit my 20s, actually I got in a really bad car accident and I messed up my neck. I hit my face on the driving on the wheel,
The
and
steering wheel?
I was knocked out and I like broke my nose in two places, and then like I said I hit the front of my head, and after that like I remember getting when I got up, um I my neck was just like so like it was hurting more than anything else, even more so than my nose. And so
Did
I
you
think
break
that
your neck?
exacerbated. No, no, I messed up like though I
Vertebrae?
they took an MRI and everything, and nothing, everything looked good. But I mean, I could feel that there was something that was not right in there, and that exacerbated it. So it was like I went to the chiropractor shortly after, and then like he was saying like I had a problem with like the C1 or atlas area, which is that's like the very very top of your spine, like the
Mhm.
bottom part of your skull. So I've always had problems with that. So I go to a chiropractor to this day to have him adjust that area. And so that car accident exacerbated everything. And I think since I didn't get physical therapy or anything after that, I just had chiropractic work. It, it healed, so to speak, the wrong way. And I think just with that lack of attention that I didn't know that I needed, um, that it just got worse and it gradually turned into like chronic migraines because I didn't get it under control, in the right amount of time. And I mean, I tried different medications and everything like that, but some of them were like did not help at all, or some of them helped for a little bit, and then it became addictive, and then you're like having to deal with the rebound of that, and so eventually I just ended up getting off of everything and like started going and using like Excedrin, which I know that's not good either because again it creates those rebounds. And now
Yeah.
I'm seeing it like a neurologist that's trying to help me with it as much as she can.
So one thing you said you didn't go to the doctor and you didn't go have physical therapy. Is that because like were you in a position that you could do that? Because obviously having insurance and having access to that type of healthcare is right essential to be able to get that. So first of all, did you have that type of access?
Oh, yes, I did. I mean, we went to the doctor, but I mean, they were always like, what if the MRI says this, there's nothing wrong, even though like I
Right.
knew I could feel it. So yeah, I mean my parents always, since we have a lot of health issues in my family, they always were like, you have to have insurance, you cannot ever let that lapse. So that was something that they always reinforced to us, I mean, growing up. So that was never a choice, even at that time, to not have insurance. Even when even whenever I got on my own, like they were helping me pay for it just so I could make sure I had it.
Yeah.
'Cause at that time,
No,
they could deny you with, if you didn't, if you let your insurance lapse, they could deny you
yeah.
once you got on another insurance or tried to get on another insurance.
Yeah, because then they would say that there was pre-existing conditions and everything
Exactly.
like that. And honestly, that's one of the things that the ACA helped with,
Hmm.
right? Was to get rid of
Yes.
that or Obamacare, but that was
Right.
one of the things that they helped that you couldn't get denied for pre-existing conditions because so many people were getting like, and if your work health insurance changes,
Hmm.
they could deny
Right.
you
Right.
coverage. It
Hmm.
was crazy. And so that's one of the things that was so prevalent in regards to that. Just that I'm only talking that, like, obviously I could talk bunch about a lot of things when it comes to politics, but that
Right.
I'm just saying in that particular thing and how important that and how key having something like that is. When you were you a creative child? Because I know, like, I get it with the hormone stuff, and like I think I that's probably when I started getting my migraines as well,
Hmm.
and have had surgery, and I've had different, like, have to be on, oh my gosh, so many medications. And I know that you said you were becoming dependent on certain things after the accident. So there's kind of a twofold question in there. One, was this something like prior? I'm sure you were already a creative person.
Hmm.
Did you find your creativity while you were taking these medications? Because we say they're medications, but they're really drugs, right? People,
Hmm.
like, if you're not monitoring them, you're in a, I'm going to say, like, good for you, because there's so many people like that don't recognize that, oh, wait, maybe I'm taking too much of this, or maybe I'm leaning on this a little bit too much. So, honestly, congratulations to you for recognizing that.
Yeah.
And
Thank you.
and if you're in a position where you recognize it and you just don't know what to do, like, there are resources that you can go to your, doctor, whatever, like, reach out to me. I will help you find them if you need that. Be I'm the sort of person, when I was on Percocet after my knee surgery,
Hmm.
I hated the way it made me feel. And I knew how long it took to be like get out of
Yeah.
your
To get out of your
system.
system.
And it
Hmm.
still took like after another month or two before I could fall asleep without it. It was horrible. I mean, those things are so strong. So
Yeah.
did that affect one, like I said, did that affect your creativity? And at what point when you were going through this did you realize, whoa, I am relying on these pills way too much? And what, like, was it a cold turkey thing for you? Did you talk to anybody about it? Because I think so often we like to keep those things hidden. We don't want anybody to know
Hmm.
that we're getting dependent on something.
Yeah, very much so. So my creativity for that actually started in high school. So it was a separate time. I mean, I was in my teenage years, obviously when I was in high school. Whereas when I was in my 20s, that's when I got addicted to it. And this was actually the first time I talked about it, to publicly, that is, it was to Fioricet. My PCP was trying to help me. I mean, it was, she's coming from a good place, because she knew I was struggling with my migraines at that time, and we just didn't know very much about it. But it was really helpful in the beginning, and then it just became to a point where, like I said, yeah, kind of what you're saying too. I was getting more dependent on it, and then realized probably in the middle of it that it was making me more sick. And I didn't realize that I was getting these rebound migraines because of the medication I was taking to help with them. So,
Wow.
so really the way we learned about it, that I guess that I realized that I had a problem, is like I think at that time I was dating a guy, he's actually my husband now. His name is Travis. I was dating him at that time, and so he was actually going through with me. And I mean, because I was very upfront when we started dating, like, hey, I had this issue. But anyways, so he was going through it with me, and he really did help me with going through it. Because I mean, there was times when I had like a really bad migraine and I'd be like vomiting you know that's what I needed to do, and I felt so much better after, like that relief. but then I'd be back in the same mess, kind of like what you're saying. You kind of knew when you needed to take the next one. So, anyways, we went to this doctor, and it was actually it was somewhere in Missouri. I can't think of where. And he was a specialist, and he was a researcher, and he was like, well, I'm looking at all your medications, and what you're going to need to do is you're going to need to get off this medication, like, it's Fioricet. And I'm like, what? And so he's like, yeah, I'm going to have to basically take you off all these meds in order for you to even for us to start this protocol with you, because I don't want anything in your system. And I'm like, he's like, that way the stuff I give you is, I know it's working, not this other stuff that's interfering. And I was like, okay. So I remember just him telling me that and us leaving the appointment, and I was just crying because I was like, there is no way that I can do this. It was just like, because I had been on the medication for like 4 or 5 years, but at that point. And so and I think actually by that point too, my husband, we were married. Um, so what we ended up doing was I ended up taking myself off of it very gradually. I couldn't do a cold turkey. One, it would trigger my migraines even more so because of the withdrawal. And two, I just did not want to see. And then even he told me, he's like, you can't do a cold turkey because you could end up like hurting yourself in the long run by doing it that way. So he's like, you're going to have to take yourself off gradually. So that's really what we did, is like I slowly stopped taking the medication. And I remember even checking in with Travis, like I was like, you're going to have to hold this medication for me and just give me, kind of help me sparse it out. So then that way I stick to it. And he was really good about helping me do that, because otherwise I don't know if I would have been able to do it on my own, because I knew I didn't want to have to deal with the pain. And after I got off of it, finally, I felt so much better. And I think I didn't realize that I was, that addicted to it, and that it was messing me up more than I thought it ever did. So it was. So like, I'm in migraine groups now. And so whenever people are like, oh, I'm on Fioricet, I'm always like, be careful with that, because that stuff can really mess you up. You're trying to
Yeah.
help your situation, but it actually, if you take it too much, it's actually hurting you in the long run. So yeah.
Wow. Well, thank you so much for sharing that, because I think we we don't realize, we just want, as just humans, right? We don't want to be in pain. We just, and we're so used to just saying going to the doctor, and doctors don't know everything, right?
Right.
And everybody responds differently to medication. So, um, and then what that's going to do to you. I don't think I've ever taken that. Um, I don't even know the list of things that, I've been that person where things work for a while, then they stop working, and then I have
Yeah.
to change it up, and then I have to change it up. And um, how did that impact your life at that time? Were you working a corporate job? Did you already have because I know I will just say for myself, when I had migraines, or now I work for myself, right? But when
Right.
I was working in corporate, I would the time, I mean, I was probably missing 6, 7 days of work a week at one point before I had surgery. I was missing, and so much work, because I was completely immobile from migraines. How was not just the migraines, but it's in combination of this narcotic, the migraines that you're trying to, but then these kickback migraines. How was that impacting your life at that point?
I mean, really, um, I was taking the medications so I wouldn't have to call in. And I think that's when it just became an issue. That's why it came even more of an issue, because I was like taking more than it said on the bottle, because I was trying to get through my day. And it's like that whole thing of like not listening to your body because you're trying to do what you can with the corporate thing. And I did call in, don't get me wrong, but at that time I had switched careers. And so I'd really made sure that I was like, okay, you're just gonna have to tough it out. Like I remember I was in a job where I really I forced myself to go to work. And I remember and it was like something where I had to travel around, and my husband he drove me everywhere that day because my migraine was so bad, and I did what I had to do. and I got through it. And I remember like that night, because I made myself go to work, I like ended up like vomiting like so much. And sorry if I'm like, anyone listening by hearing about this, but yeah, it
So
was
realities of of getting migraines.
yeah,
I've been there, girl.
yeah. So I mean, really it was something that I just really, I think that's why I ended up starting to abuse the medication, because I was just trying to like force myself to just get through it. And, and I think kind of back then, and, even just in retrospect, just thinking about it now, like I think that that's when you kind of realize that, I knew corporate wasn't for me, because I was trying to keep pushing myself, even though my body was like, you need to like stop, and just take it easy. And I wasn't allowing myself, because I was, trying to do what I was supposed to do.
That, and honestly, that was the kind of what I was going to be leading into, because I'm sure that's something that helped you lean into, okay, I can't do this, because when you are in corporate, right? And I think as lovely as it is to have insurance through your work that you're not having, I mean, these days, who knows? I mean, it depends on the company, right? But kind of going back to what your parents think, always make sure you have insurance and stuff,
Mhm.
which means in my head, okay, and tell me if this is resonates with you, or maybe this resonates with anybody. When your parents are telling you that, to me, it's like you get that corporate job, you keep your head down, you do what you need to do to keep this quote unquote steady job, which we
Yes,
all now know there is no such thing as a quote unquote steady job.
absolutely.
Um, and then you're like, look, I'm trying to, in your head, you're probably like, I'm trying to do what I'm supposed to do. It's not working. I have these health issues. I have this net, like phys like physical, mental, emotional issues, because I'm sure that accident caused a lot of other traumas outside of the physical trauma.
Yes.
Um, and you're like, I'm doing what I'm supposed to be doing. I'm doing what my parents want, and this isn't working out. And you get to the point for yourself where you're just like, I literally physically cannot do this anymore. It's making me more sick. When and were you married at this point?
Yes. Mhm.
So when you had the conversation with your husband in regards to that, how did that conversation go?
I mean, he knew, as far as, sorry, let me clarify the question. Like, as far as like what I was dealing with my migraines, or is that what
Well,
the
as
question
far
you're
as like
asking?
when you're like, I can't work in corporate anymore.
Okay, so that was actually like later after, like that was like actually like 7 years ago approximately. I was trying to stick it out with an office job, and I really did my best. And I mean, I remember coming home crying, because I was just so frustrated, and just a lot of things. So we had just had my son. He was like 6 months, I think, at that point, because I went from working in a clinic to working in an office environment, because I was trying to think I was going to get more flexibility. And that was not the case. And so like I ended up, like I said, it was just a very toxic environment. So I remember talking to my husband about, like, I'm like, I really feel like I need to leave. And he's just like, I really like, I'm going to make sure that you're trying to, like making sure that you're doing as best as you can. And I'm like, I am doing everything I can. So like we talked about it, and I stuck it out for as long as I could. And then like at that time, I was pumping breast milk for my son, so my hormones were all over the place. So like I was started getting more migraines again. Like they had, like during my pregnancy, I only had like 2 migraines, and I was like, oh my god, this is a miracle, And so I'm like, I need to be pregnant all the time, but actually, obviously, I don't want to do that. But it really did help my migraines. But after I had my son, my hormones went back to kind of being kind of crazy and everything like that. So my migraine started getting exacerbated, and then my son was getting sick, so I had to call in, and I got in trouble at work because you know well, at that time we didn't have any childcare outside of my husband and me, because his parents lived far away. My parents at that time lived in Arizona, and so they had moved there after I went to college there. And so I got in trouble and because my son got sick, he had a fever, and he couldn't go to daycare. So I remember them calling me in the office, and they're like, we're gonna write you up because you called in for like the second or third time. And I'm like, okay. And I told them the situation, like, what I just said now, and they were just like looked at me, like stared at me, like there was no care, no concern, nothing. And I remember the one of my managers even said, like, because I said that my son kept getting ear infections, and the one of my managers, like I said, she was a nurse and RN, and she was like, well, I don't know why you're dealing with this, because my son got ear infections, and after he started getting them so often, I just put him on antibiotics for a year and a half, and then he didn't have to deal with that. And I was like, yeah, I don't want to do that. Like, I don't want to put my son on antibiotics for that long, because obviously that's not good for good for them in the long run. I mean, that's not good for their gut. You hear about that whole thing about, with antibiotic resistance and that type of stuff. So I'm not trying to
Yeah.
set him up with that situation when he's
All
a
the kids
baby.
that I've known that were really sick as kids, I mean, like always getting colds, always getting, are the healthiest kids now because
Yes. Hmm.
they got all that and they were able to naturally build up their immune system. Now, not saying that they didn't have their immunization, they still had all their immunization shots and everything. But, when you kids go to daycare and when kids are around other kids, they're just one big germ, right?
Yes, yes, yes. And he was getting sick. We were getting sick. Yeah, it was just crazy. So I remember just calling my husband after that, and I was like, I can't do this anymore. I'm like, and I told him the situation. And he's like, okay. Yeah, he's like, I feel like you're really, we can do it, and financially, and I know that you have tried really hard, and it's not working. So he's like, you do what you need to do. So I, quit that day, or I told them I was gonna give them 2 weeks notice. And then they're like, you know what, you can actually, go ahead and just leave, uh, you know, today can be your last day, and we'll pay you for the next 2 days or whatever. So I was like, okay. So, that was great, but I think we had just met, like we were good with leaving where it was at. I think all of us felt that way. So, so that's what actually what I went full time in my business, because when I was on maternity leave, I and when my son was sleeping, after I'd come home from work or whatever, I would work on like graphic design and like that type of stuff, just to make sure that that was something I wanted to do, especially since I was switching back to my original career during that time. So whenever I left my job, I was like, okay, I'm ready to go full time into it.
Yeah, because I heard you say that you were working at a clinic. Then, so obviously you found your creativity. I think many of us find our creativity or what we're good at when we're young. Maybe not everybody, but we hone in on something, right? Some people
Mhm.
are sports people, some people are very creative and readers. Some there a lot of times it's combinations of things. Some people find that they just like math. Girl, I have one of my good friends, Deanna, is a math teacher, and she's such one of the most beautiful people I know. And I'm like, I couldn't do it. All right. Like you find the so what was that like you found your creativity? How was that like explored when you were younger? And what was and you don't have to go into all of the detail. You can kind of just summarize like, yes, I knew I liked this. Maybe I went to college for this, but I couldn't find anything, or kind of connect the dots between your discovering your creativity. Was it through art? Was it through music? Whatever that was, into your corporate world, and now where you're at now.
Okay, so I found it when I was in high school. Back in the day, we had desktop publishing, Microsoft desktop publishing, and so that's really what I worked in. A lot of my friends, I remember learning later on, like they were working in like Adobe at that time. So I'm like, we didn't have that at my school, and so, but I worked in that, so I loved it, and I would stay after school, and this sounds kind of nerdy or whatever, but I stayed after school just to work on stuff that like wasn't assigned to me, just but I was just designing it because I loved it. And so when it was time for me to pick like to go when to decide what to do, what I was gonna what sorry when it was time for me to decide what I wanted to do for my life, if you will, it was between graphic design. That's really what I was leaning towards. And my mom wanted me to do surgical tech, which and it is in the medical field. But I really wanted to go for graphic design. That's really where my heart was. But my mom's like, don't do that because it's not dependable and all this other stuff. But my dad was like, do what your heart tells you, like do it, just because you're going to be happier in the end. So I followed his advice and I went to school for graphic design. I got my associates in that, and then I went to Arizona. I moved to Arizona to get my bachelor's and moved back. And so actually I worked in the agencies and like different design agencies for a few years. 2008 hit. And at that time I was actually kind of getting burned out because I was a production artist at the time. So I was learning a lot from the art directors and everything like that, but I wasn't being able to be really creative like I wanted to. They were just kind of telling me what to do, which don't get me wrong, I learned a lot from them, but it wasn't something that I like I said, I wasn't like meeting those needs of a creativity. So I was getting burned out. And like I said, it was around 2008. And that's when the economy, that was hit with, the slump. And so a lot of people in marketing lost their jobs. And it really was a blessing in disguise because I ended up going back to school. And because I really wanted to do something with my life at that time, I wanted to do something else and I really wanted to help people. And so I went into back, like I said, back to school to do physical therapy assistant. And so that took me a few years to get through. And then whenever I graduated, like I said, I worked in home health for about a year on my own. And then I worked in the clinic. And that's really where I got my fitting with a lot of stuff. And I met a lot of the people there. And then and then after that, my boss at the time was like, you guys are going to have to probably find a new job because Medicare is trying to cut PTAs out of the field because they didn't want to reimburse. So he was like, you're going to have to look for other work. So I'm like, okay. So then that's why I went into the office environment to, save my job or have a job as a PTA. And then, but again, it didn't work. So, and then that's based on that environment. Again, that was a really toxic environment for me. I ended up going full time into my business. So it really was kind of like, graphic design for a long time, then physical therapy assistant for a little while, and then back into it just because it worked for my flexibility and for my health and for my family.
Right. And that totally makes sense. And sometimes we have to, we're doing the thing that we think we want to do. Sometimes we have to leave it to realize how much we like it and how much we want to go back to that. So I think to have that realization, and I think probably everything that was going on was helping at the time to kind of push you that way. I know when you're talking about it, you say you want to empower women-owned businesses, entrepreneurs, nonprofits. One of the things that I really was drawn to is that you say you draw from your Mexican American roots and that you kind of insert that. Now when in everything that you do, is that when you're talking about inserting your culture, are you talking about inserting the principles of your culture, or like how are you using your culture to influence the work that you do?
It's a great question. So I would say as someone who grew up in that community, I was saying like that Caucasian community and then kind of not really being able to celebrate my culture. I run into, or I talk to a lot of people, especially female business owners or, or even minority business owners that they feel like they're trying to get their voice out there, but it's not necessarily, they don't know how to either because they've had the same experience of trying to like keeping themselves in this little small area, if you will, and really not being able to get their voice out. So I feel like I'm like using my culture as far as that experience of being proud of who I am, and like as far and even more so with my culture and being not really being able to express that. And I feel like a lot of people have like, at least like I said, the business owners I've spoken to don't really know how to use their voice yet to really get that information out there. So I kind of use it from that perspective of like, I know how important my culture is. And obviously everyone has their own experiences with that, but when you're not able to celebrate it, or when you're, people, say things to you that makes you feel like less than because whatever, that's, it's just, I think that's not something that I want to make sure that people who are, have their own business, who are, they're dealing with all the entrepreneurship issues that can come up. I don't want that to be a hindrance for them. I don't want that to be another roadblock. I want to make sure that I'm listening to them, and that they have that voice, and I'm able to use their experience or what they're trying to communicate, um, and really highlight that and make sure that they're being heard. Because I feel like that's something that happens a lot. And I guess with in any community, obviously more so in the, women and people of color types of communities, even more so. But I think with all the people that's what the experience is, they don't really know how to communicate that. I don't know if I answered your question.
Yeah, no, I mean it's something that communication between, because as a graphic designer, you are trying to convey, you have to convey a message, emotion, a call to action, right?
Yeah.
Something recognizable, something that people like, for example, when people see my like the logo for my podcast, obviously it says it, but it's very recognizable, right?
Yes.
They relate it back to the podcast, they relate it back to me. So you have to create a lot of things with one image. What are the biggest, what would you say the biggest challenges when you're working with somebody? If somebody is coming to you and saying, "Oh, I'm doing this or I'm doing that," what are the biggest challenges that you have to walk them through to convey that what to help them help you, right? To help them help you, because you have to convey so much with an image.
One thing I really make sure that people really decide, because I have them give me references of like what they've seen on, whether it's another business or whatever. Obviously we're not trying to copy them at all. That's like the last thing I ever want to do, but it helps me kind of get in the right lane of what they're thinking. But I also want to make sure I tell them too, like, you may like this person's website, or you may like this person's logo or whatever, but you also have to think that this is your company. You don't want to be similar to this other person's, because then when they look at these two different images, they're not going to know the difference of like, hey, what's the difference between this business and what's the difference between the other. You really want to make sure that you have that signature look, if you will, so that way you can make sure that you're, yes, you may be in the same industry, but you're not the same people, you're not the same business, you do your business differently.
Right? Yeah, you don't want to, I mean, that's super key. When you're doing something, you don't want it to look like everybody else, right? You want to, if you're starting a company or you want to know that you want to have your own identity,
Right.
right? Because if you're
Exactly.
twinning with everybody else, then who's going to know who is who, and how are people going to know what your missions and what your values are? And maybe if you might like the look of something, but their missions and values may be in complete misalignment with what yours are. So you
Exactly.
have to
Yes.
have your own identity with that. How is, like, with all of the things that you've gone through and all of the things that you continue to struggle with in regards to health, how does that impact? I mean, obviously you have a lot more flexibility owning your own company and choosing your own clients, but how does that still impact you on a day to day? Because still owning your own company can be very stressful. Getting clients can be very stressful. Deadlines can be very stressful. How do you how do you bring that all together? How do you work within all of the things that you have to deal with, in addition to the responsibilities that you have to yourself and your clients with your company?
I try to I think I've learned this probably more so in the last couple of years than I have when I started my business, of when I talk to somebody, before I even take them on as a client, is making sure that like we really mesh well. and that we make sure we're seeing eye to eye. And then the other thing is, after, if I decide to go with them and they decide to go with me, obviously it's a mutual thing. But not to take on so much work that I feel like I'm overwhelmed, because it is just me and my business. There's no one else designing, in the background. Although I wish sometimes there was, to kind of help, take that other stress off. But I mean, obviously I know I'm probably, there was something I would not like about that, obviously. But I would say that I really am picky with who I take on as a client and how many clients I do take on, because I know with, working around my health issues and wanting to make sure I spend time with my family and not forgetting that that's like those two things that that I never lose focus of, is that, I'm going to make sure I take on the right amount of work, that I can move it around how I need to within my business, and still get still meet those deadlines, and still do, the best that I can for my clients when I'm feeling my best, and not when I'm like feeling like so like bad and forcing myself to do that. That's like the last thing I ever want to do.
Yeah, of course. You don't want to you because then that would only probably exacerbate your health problems. You're also certified women's business enterprise, and you're an MWBE through the Kansas Department of Commerce. And here's a couple of things that you say if people struggle with. You've taken your website development as far as you can and need help getting the look and leads you have in mind. Website platforms are confusing with all the tech, so you're done with the DIY path. Your brand identity is unclear and confusing, therefore, it creates anxiety in your business and it shows. So you help with all of these different types of challenges, which especially for small businesses and even nonprofits, right? Because
Mhm.
myself being, you know, a solopreneur, you have limited funds and sometimes it's hard to use multiple people for multiple things. If people, I want to make sure because I want to respect your time, but and I'm so glad honestly that we did talk a lot about not only where you came from, but the struggles that you've had, because I think that's really important for people to hear and how you've used that to fuel your business. I
Mhm.
think that's really beautiful, Marisa, truly.
Thank you. I really
Um,
appreciate that.
I think, it's so often we talk about all of the beautiful, wonderful things about entrepreneurship, but we don't often talk about, or I try to ask about the struggles as well, right? But it's really important to know what the struggles are. But not only that, not just within your business, but just the struggles that you've personally had that led you to start your own business. Because I can't imagine how many people are going to hear this that maybe not maybe either personally identify with somebody that they love. So
Right.
the fact that you opened up, I just want to say thank you so much. It's so unbelievably appreciated. And it takes a lot of strength to be able to reflect on those types of times and be able to share it publicly.
Thank you. I really appreciate you giving me the opportunity to do so.
If I want to make sure if there's anything else that you want to share, the floor is yours, my friend.
Okay, well, first I want to thank you for the opportunity to be on here. And then I really enjoyed talking to you when we originally talked, and then obviously even more so now. I love what you're doing, and I love that you're giving the Latino community more power to our voice, and more ears to listen, I guess, if you will. So if you're a small business owner, and you are needing help with your logos or brand, or even just general graphic design, um, really, I love working with minority-owned businesses, women-owned businesses, and nonprofits. I really try to meet you where you're at, and I will talk you through anything I need to. I'm very much of working one-on-one, and working alongside you, not doing it for you, as far as this is your business and I want it to look the way you want it to. But obviously, I'm the professional and I am giving you my expertise, and that's because that's what you hired me for. So, really, that's what I want to make sure that people understand is it is very much of a partnership. When I'm working with someone and during that time, I'm giving you all of my attention. Um, as well as, like I said, all of my expertise behind that. So I love, like I said, working with branding and websites. I work in WordPress and Squarespace mostly. Yeah, just, come talk to me or come go look at my website or, whatever. I do chats and I do discovery calls and, they're very separate. I don't try to sell or anything like that. So
And you do offer a 30-minute discovery call.
yes, I do.
So I want to make sure everybody has your info. It's going to be in the show notes. It's Marisa with one S, marisagstudios.com. Marisa G Studios on Facebook, Instagram, and on LinkedIn, it's Marisa Gonzales. So all of those things will be in the show notes. And I encourage you guys to reach out. I mean, look at the answer. You'll never know the answer if you don't ask the question. I always say the answer is always no if you don't ask the question. In this instance, the answer is like, even if you're thinking about it, sometimes you need a little bit of inspiration, right? Sometimes you're like, should I do it? Should I do it? And sometimes the inspiration can come from the image or from a feeling or whatever. And then you're like, oh, this is exactly what I needed. Yes, this means the door is open. So I encourage you all to, if you feel so inclined, I encourage you to reach out to Marisa and do a 30-minute discovery call, right? What's the worst that could happen? You decide maybe I need to wait, or maybe you're just blown away and here's the start to a new opportunity. So, again, Marisa, thank you so, so much. I really appreciate you sharing. And mi gente, until next time.
Hola, mi gente. Thank you for listening to this episode of the Wine and Chisme podcast. If you would like to hear more wine and more chisme, make sure to hit that subscribe button. Saludos.